On the night of June 17th, 1972, 24-year-old Frank Willis, security guard, is walking around the Watergate Hotel, and he's checking, and he notices that there's a piece of tape over a lock on a door.
Yes,
And he's like,
yeah.
"Well, that's odd. It's a piece of tape so that the latch will come out, so it remains open." Um, I mean, in retrospect, you should have used like see-through tape or something, right?
Yeah.
I'm I'm picturing that blue painter's tape. That's what I'm
Right.
picturing.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of WTF History. Those of you who watch, and we thank our hundreds of thousands of listeners and our tens of thousands of subscribers. My understanding is that David has got a wonderful episode about something a little more contemporary.
I am really interested in the little bit people in history that make big changes
Yeah.
and oftentimes are forgotten about, like completely. They fall into the dustbin of history. I think we covered one in a previous episode about a guy named Nicholas Trist. I think you remember him, and we talked
Yeah.
about him, and pretty important guy in our borders and how America developed. And no one remembers his name, and he ended up becoming like a station depot dude. Can you imagine the guy? Like you're there stamping tickets, and you're like, "Oh, if they only knew, I drew
And
that border."
he's sipping from rum and telling people, I set the border of the United States. Yeah, sure you did, but
So today I want to talk about, you've heard of Watergate. Everybody's heard of Watergate.
of
And
course.
Watergate, of course, is named after the huge, it's like, condominium, business, building. I mean, it's a very, very large complex. And so the Democrat National Committee had their offices in the Watergate, right? Because you got people living there, you got people working there. It's
Sure.
a very big complex. And there was a young man by the name of Frank Willis, who was a security guard. Now, Frank Willis was born to a single mother in Savannah, Georgia. He later moved up to Detroit, Grand Rapids, Michigan, to because he dropped out of high school, so he moved up to Grand Rapids and he worked for Job Corps, got an equivalency degree. Then he went to work for Ford on the assembly line, and he ended up having to quit because he had asthma. So he's still in his early 20s, like 21, 22. He's already gone from Georgia to Michigan in between jobs, and he ends up moving out to DC because he decides, people tell him, "Hey, you should come out here and work in a hotel." There's good work in hotels. You can be a bellman, work at a desk, whatever. And so he had worked at a couple of hotels, and then a position became open for a security guard at the Watergate Hotel. And so Frank Willis, who's now, I think, 23, when he started the job, he goes to work in the Watergate. And his job is just to walk around. You check all the doors, make sure they're still locked. And I used to do that when I was in the military. On the night of June 17th, 1972, 24-year-old Frank Willis, security guard, is walking around the Watergate Hotel. And he's checking, and he notices that there's a piece of tape over a lock on a door.
Yes,
And he's like,
yeah.
"Well, that's odd. It's a piece of tape so that the latch will come out, so it remains open." Um, I mean, in retrospect, you should have used like see-through tape or something, right?
Yeah.
I'm I'm picturing that blue painter's tape. That's what I'm
Right.
picturing.
Right.
But you'd think there would have been a better way for these high, quality guys to have done this. But he sees this tape over the latch on the door lock, and he's like, that's weird," and he takes it off. Then he continues on his rounds and comes back, and he looks at the door like, he's like, "Oh, that's the door that had tape on it." And he's like, "What the fuck? It has tape on it again."
Crazy.
And so he's like, "Okay, this is weird." So he immediately goes upstairs to the lobby, and he calls the 3rd Precinct cops in DC. And this being the early 1970s, they showed up very quickly. Uh,
Not like today.
Today, you
Yeah.
would have got like an AI thing. "Please state
Yeah.
your problem." And so they came rather quickly, and they immediately they froze all the elevators, and they locked out all the doors at the Watergate business complex. And then they went floor by floor, with the cops, which is pretty impressive. I mean, here's a guy saying, "Hey, I got tape on the door," and they do all this,
Yeah.
right? That's pretty
Exactly.
impressive. But I think it's because they knew the Democrat National Committee was there. And so they go up, and it is the DNC offices that had the tape on the door.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Okay, that's the door." So they've checked all the floors. They come to the office. They turn on the lights. They have their flashlights, and they look up, and slowly but surely, one, two, three, four, five burglars end up all standing up and coming out.
Crazy.
And that was the beginning of the Watergate scandal. That was the beginning of the Watergate scandal that changed the trajectory of politics for the United States for a couple of decades. Ended up with the president resigning, ended up with all sorts of changes. Congress changed hands, right?
Change the language, right? I mean, like today, every scandal, it's like, oh, this was blah, blah, blah gate and blah, blah, blah gate. I mean, it's
Right. You're
in the
right.
hotel. And
Everything's a gate now because of Watergate. None of that would have happened if this 24-year-old security guard hadn't walked by and said, "Hey, is that tape on the door? Maybe I should do
correct.
something." I can imagine a lot of, even I at that age might have said, I'm too busy for this shit and kept on going, right?
Yeah, yeah. You also wonder if the burglars had been bold enough to own it and like left a note like painters at work loading equipment, don't lock me out, right?
Right, right,
Like most security guards would be like, oh, okay, and then they wait for the guy
right.
to come back. Oh yeah, hey buddy, just moving some stuff upstairs, like no big deal, right? And
Correct. Because, it's like I know guys that say you can get anywhere in your life with a clipboard and a high visibility vest.
yes,
You can
yeah.
walk anywhere you want. Just
Don't
carry a
forget the hard
clipboard.
hat.
And
The
yeah,
hard
and a
hat.
hard hat and
Yeah,
and a high vis vest, and you can get
yeah.
anywhere you need. They should have done something like that. So, but
So true.
they were in the process of bugging the Democrat National Committee on the orders of the folks around Richard Nixon, and we don't need to get into Watergate. That's a whole 5 episodes. But about poor Frank Willis, this young guy from Savannah, Georgia, by way of Detroit, Michigan, never would have happened. So what you're saying, Mike, is, well, God, the whole world must have thrown a parade for Frank, and he must have lived the rest of his life with like people peeling grapes for him and saying, "Thank you for saving our democracy, Mr.
Right.
Willis," right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, not so quick. So that's exactly what didn't happen. So Frank went to his bosses there and said, "Hey, I did pretty good, right? Like, can I get a raise?" So they did give him a raise. They gave him a raise of $2.50 per week. Right, not 250 per hour, 250 per week, $2.50 per week. That was the raise they gave him. And he said, "Well, okay, but can I at least get a promotion? Can I get a higher grade so that way I look good?" And they said, "No, we're not going to give you a higher promotion." So they refused to give him a higher promotion. They only gave him $2.50 a week extra for his great work in saving democracy. He got a little upset, and he ended up quitting. And so after he quit, people didn't want to hire him because, remember, this is Washington D.C. and
Sure.
people are concerned that if they hire this guy, the Republicans are going to be mad, right?
Yeah.
And they're going to come after them for hiring him. So Howard University hired him, but they ended up letting him go because they were afraid of the publicity and that someone
Yeah.
in the Senate or the Congress might get upset that they hired this guy that was, hurting the Republican Party at the time. And
Crazy.
he couldn't get a job, so he had to get minimum wage jobs. And then because the media had so many media requests for interviews with him, like it was tough for him to hold the job because he's like, well, I want to do the media request because maybe this publicity will help me get a job, right? But then that would hurt him on his minimum wage fast food jobs, and they would end up letting him go. So he couldn't hold a job. He was let go by his employers. And what he ended up doing was by the mid 70s, remember, this was in 72, by the mid 70s, by like 75, 76, he had moved down to North Carolina to move in with his mother to take care of his mother. And they both lived off of her $450 a month Social Security check. This was the guy, but for
Who literally discovered the Watergate break-in.
discovered Watergate, and he's
Wow.
now living with his poor ailing mother in North Carolina, living off of $450 a month in Social Security. No one cared. No one cared. So if you think about all the money that
Wow.
people made off of Watergate, the movies, the books, Woodward and Bernstein, right? They all
Sure.
made money off of this. All of the news outlets made money off of this. No one could throw this kid a
Yeah.
dime. No one cared. No one cared to throw
Jeez,
this
that's
kid a
crazy.
dime.
Huh.
Um, it
Wow.
really is very both upsetting and sad that this is what happened to the guy
For
who
sure.
ended up, who not ended up, but who discovered the Watergate scandal. He
Yeah,
discovered
who
it,
took pride in his job, did his job well, and changed history, right?
and
That's
no one
crazy.
cared. No one
That's crazy.
cared. So later on in life, he ended up, again, living with his mother. He was pretty destitute. By the late 70s, early 80s, he had been arrested repeatedly on shoplifting. His mother ended up dying in 1992, and because he was too poor to bury her, he ended up selling his mother's body to a local hospital for science. And then he lived the rest of his life essentially tending to his little garden at the apartment, going to the library every day to kill time and take care of his cats. And he died at the age of 52 of a brain tumor. And that's Frank Willis, an American hero, and the way America treats its heroes. Dying at the age of 52, destitute with a brain tumor, having to sell his mother's body to science because he can't afford to bury her. It's it's both. So three things, Mike. One, I want people to know his name. I want people to know the name of Frank Willis and what he did. And two, I want them to know how he was treated. I wanted them to know that this guy who should be a hero and kids should be taught about, here's what happens when you do your job and you do it well. Frank Willis. And then also, on the other hand, I want people to know that there were people making a hell of a lot of money off of Watergate, and not one of them shared it with this guy.
And the moral of the story is get a PR agent, right?
Right.
No, but I mean, no, seriously, those are very, very good points. I hope everybody out there appreciates what this guy did, and I hope everybody learns from this episode. I think this was a very, very good episode, and it really sparked something in me. We talked today about one of the heroes of Watergate. I think it would be fascinating, and we also talk about historical archetypes. You know, the rugged old guy in pioneer times, you know, who did this and that and like died at age 30. I think we should talk about some of the anti-heroes of the 60s and 70s in another episode. I'd love the audience to write in the comments if you want to hear about that. For those who don't know what I'm talking about the archetype who like served in World War II at age 19, you know, toward the end, kind of got involved in some intelligence-like stuff, you know, came back home, kept some ties, like was somehow involved in the Bay of Pigs, somehow involved in the Kennedy assassination, somehow involved in Watergate. Believe it or not, guys, there's a long list of guys who fit.
There are.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
We should cover some of those.
Your head explode. It is fascinating.
Yeah, we should cover some of those. Oh, by the way, someone asked him later in his life, hey, so do you regret doing what you did? And his answer to them was, that's like asking me if I'd rather be white than black. I don't know. It was my destiny. Like, I just did what was destined for me to do. And he said, you know, I know a lot of people, he brought up Woodward and Bernstein. Woodward and Bernstein have made really good careers off of Watergate, but I haven't seen a penny.
God, that's crazy.
Yeah. So that is Frank Willis. And man, this was a good episode. Mike, I hope you enjoyed it. Hope it was something.
I did.
Yeah.
I did. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Hey, if you like what you hear, like and subscribe. It really means a lot, and we would love to have you coming back every week. Thank you.